in the 1930s, you set up a system whereby individuals would pay a tax out of their earnings, and they'd pay a certain percentage. It's currently up to about 7.5%, something like that, out of your first $125,000 of earnings a few years ago. So it's probably a bit higher. And your employer pays a similar amount. Some of that goes to Medicare, but most of that's for Social Security. And then from that revenue is the legal authority to pay Social Security benefits. Somewhere along the line, actually it happened multiple times. Nobody really freaked out about it until the early 80s. The program revenues were less than program's outlays. And so periodically they would raise the tax rate to cover that. The other thing they started doing is sometimes the revenues coming in would be in excess of the outlays. And so they would save those in a trust fund. And I put that in quotations because that's not really what happens when we're talking about the currency issuer, that they're putting funds into a trust fund to draw down later, at least in the financial sense. Then in the early 80s, there were estimates that when the baby boomers started to retire, that the revenues would be woefully inadequate. So they had this Greenspan commission that was put together to figure out what to do. And I believe the tax rate was increased and the excess was put into, again, a so-called trust fund. These are the trust funds we are aware of today. They have the trustees of the Social Security and Medicare trust funds that then keep track of how large the trust funds are relative to what the outlays are going to be. And so there comes a day where the revenues are permanently less than the outlays, and so then they draw down the trust funds. And then they have a number of assumptions with the trust fund. There's some legal interest rate that's paid on the funds and the trust funds. So then it's kind of like if you were to have a portfolio of investments and you were drawing down more than what you were earning each year, right? That eventually you would use it all up. Or in the real world, an individual might die first, of course. But society, we're not thinking of it that way because society hopefully doesn't die. But eventually it all gets drawn down. That gets adjusted because the revenues themselves can start to rise at some point in the future, because if you look at the distribution of the age of the population, the baby boomers are kind of a one-time blip going through. And so once they're through, the distribution changes a bit again. And so it's a matter of, do the trust funds survive that to some degree? So anyway, that's sort of the way that the average person, the politicians, et cetera, look at it. Of course, it's not the way we really look at that within MMT, though.